So we're here with Green Party leader Elizabeth May. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.
And so I wanted to ask you a few questions about these recent reviews. There's an ongoing review right now, but tonight we're talking about the Energy East pipeline first. So what would you say went wrong with that review federally?
Well, that review federally, of course, all reviews since 2012 have been wrong because the legislative framework has been distorted towards helping pipelines get approvals. That was done under Stephen Harper in Omnibus Budget Bill C-38, which repealed the Environmental Assessment Act that had been brought in under Brian Mulroney and created for the first time, and this is important for people to know, up until 2012, the National Energy Board had no role at all, zero, in environmental assessments. They're incompetent. They're competent to do the job they traditionally did, but they've never done environmental assessments before. They don't really know how to do an environmental assessment. And they're further handicapped by having a legislative framework that doesn't define the environment in any common sense way. And they had a foreshortened timeline, also created by Harper, that meant the reviews were rushed. Now, in the case of Energy East, because of the approval of Keystone, TransCanada, the promoting private sector corporation, decided it couldn't possibly get contracts for two pipelines, so it withdrew its application on Energy East.
We're still seeing that in terms of Keystone, it is getting some government subsidies in order to go ahead, and we don't even know yet whether it will.
Right. I find it deeply frustrating, all of the chest thumping that we get in Parliament about how, can Canada build anything? Well, the United States is, as you say, may not be able to build Keystone. There are still court actions. There are still real concerns about the aquifer below the Keystone route. But the reality is that the Keystone pipeline and Energy East and Kinder Morgan and the Enbridge pipeline, none of them should be built because their purpose is to export raw bitumen to refineries in other countries. And if Canada had any kind of policy for energy security or maximizing the jobs per unit of production or maintaining any kind of climate plan, we wouldn't be entertaining any of these pipelines.
The amount of money Alberta is spending specifically, I think they're spending money to ship or to buy shipping space on Keystone, which, does that tell you anything about its economic viability?
Well, exactly. Well, I wonder about the bottomless pit that Rachel Notley's prepared to spend of other people's money to promote pipelines. They have billboards on the highways in my riding telling people that Kinder Morgan meant more schools, roads, and hospitals. And the only way that was true is if you add the words "in Texas," because obviously Kinder Morgan now has gotten $4.5 billion from us to go away. But Kinder Morgan knew their project wasn't economical, and that's why they staged the kidnapping of their own project, by which I refer to, saying on April 8th, if this project isn't approved, if we don't have a guarantee by May 31st, we're out of here. That was because they wanted to get out because they hadn't gotten the confirmed contracts. They didn't have a market. So yes, Alberta is subsidizing Keystone. The National Energy Board, by the way, gave Kinder Morgan $220 million during their assessment of it to help this multi-billion-dollar Houston, Texas pipeline company get through a Canadian regulatory review. We gave them $220 million. These guys have their hands out at all times.
Have we learned anything, or has the federal government learned anything in how it's approaching its review right now of Trans Mountain?
Tragically not. It appears they have not learned anything. A 22-week timeline, at first I thought that might work because I assumed fairness. And I assumed when I heard the announcement, the National Energy Board will have to reconvene hearings. That'll take them a bit of time to get organized. And then there'll be a hearing that lasts 22 weeks. To my horror, it's 22 weeks from when Amarjeet Sohi held a press conference. There's 1 week, September 26th to October 3rd, for people to submit. I resubmitted as an intervener. I intervened in the first round of shamefully flawed process. But 22 weeks, including through Christmas, who knows what the participatory rights will be? We haven't been told. They're actually asking for public comment on whether they should follow the Federal Court of Appeal. If you read the letter from the NEB, they say we have to look at whether we should consider shipping as absolutely incidental to the project. Well, the court rather did tell them that they should, that their report was fatally flawed because they didn't. So why on earth are they soliciting public comment on whether they should consider shipping or not? I'm afraid that the federal government's approach is still, how do we get shovels in the ground? How fast can we get shovels in the ground? And if that's your mindset, you can't run a fair process, and you certainly can't do legitimate good faith consultations with Indigenous peoples.
Looking forward, the federal government has introduced Bill C-69, which it says will address some of the deficiencies that they said existed under the previous Harper government. Does Bill C-69 fix reviews of projects like this going forward?
Not at all. Catherine McKenna has fundamentally failed in her mandate letter from the Prime Minister that said that she was to restore and repair the environmental assessment process. C-69 is opposed by the oil patch because it's got holes you could drive a truck through for ministerial discretion at many points. But it also keeps Harper's framework for review. I, as you can tell, am livid because I've done environmental assessments since the first one in 1976. I never thought that after the 2015 election we would see a piece of legislation as putrid as C-69. It's an omnibus bill. It's NEB, environmental assessment, and navigable waters together. But the worst part of it is the environmental assessment piece. They spent over $1 million on an expert panel of environmental assessment lawyers, and then they completely ignored their advice. They had 31 public hearings across Canada, and then they treated that expert report on what the panel's jurisdiction should be, what the government should do, they treated it as just one more stakeholder input among all the other ones they got. They should be ashamed. I hope that the Senate takes a long time with Bill 69 and repairs it so it does not keep Harper's framework. And they've kept the NEB involved. They've kept the offshore petroleum boards involved. It's shameful.
Okay. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mike.